Why did Prince William secretly block his own brother from attending the 2026 BAFTA Awards? And why was Prince Harry, red-faced, furious, and blindsided, pacing a London hotel suite with clenched fists while security guards quietly received new orders from Kensington Palace? This wasn't just about an awards ceremony. This was a declaration of war, a silent, tactical, cold-blooded strike from one royal brother to another. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And no one saw it coming, because for months, the public had been lulled into believing that perhaps, just perhaps, the tensions were softening, that the icy wall between the princes of Wales and Sussex might finally begin to thaw, that family, blood, and time would mend what media scandals, explosive memoirs, and transatlantic interviews had broken. But behind the glossy facade of royal press statements and PR-controlled smiles was a very different reality. A reality that exploded in full view when Harry, fully dressed and prepped for what he thought would be his grand UK re-entry, was privately informed. "You are not welcome." Not only was Harry not on the guest list, he had been deliberately, explicitly banned. And not by BAFTA officials, not by producers, not by Hollywood's elite, but by his own brother. Prince William, the president of BAFTA and the future King of England. Let that sink in for a moment. William, often hailed as the calm, diplomatic, more regal brother, made the decision to publicly shut the door on his own flesh and blood. Not just behind the scenes, not through intermediaries, but directly, unmistakably, and irreversibly. What could possibly drive such a brutal choice? What happened behind closed palace doors that made William finally snap? And how did Harry, who had his own plans to reclaim the spotlight, react when he realized he'd been politically outmaneuvered on British soil? This story isn't just about celebrity, royalty, or red carpet drama. This is about power, control, and the unraveling of a brotherhood that once captivated the world. Because long before the Netflix cameras rolled, before the memoir bombshells, before Montecito, Oprah, Spotify, Archwell, and the countless headlines, there were two boys, two brothers, standing side by side at their mother's funeral, grieving under the public eye, walking silently behind Diana's casket, bound not just by loss, but by the shared trauma of growing up royal. That moment was supposed to be unbreakable, but here we are, decades later, standing at the wreckage of what once was, watching as one brother draws a red line across the red carpet and tells the other, "You can't come in." And the consequences of that decision, they go far deeper than public embarrassment. They signal the possible final collapse of any hope for reconciliation. Because unlike past disagreements, which were coated in silence, smoothed over with official statements, or buried under passive-aggressive interviews, this BAFTA ban was loud, deliberate, and, perhaps worst of all, inevitable. It wasn't the first move in this war, and it won't be the last. But it was a turning point, one that's left insiders stunned, Hollywood rattled, and royal watchers asking, what the hell happened? So here's what we're going to do in the next chapters. We'll go behind the palace gates, into the rooms where decisions were made. We'll unpack the emails, the calls, the whispers, and the power plays that led to this dramatic moment. We'll follow Meghan's quiet ambitions for the red carpet, her attempts to rebrand, her interactions with Netflix and stylists, and how, according to insiders, her bold strategy may have pushed William over the edge. We'll explore the forgotten feuds. The 2020 BAFTA snub Meghan never forgave. The racial controversy she tried to weaponize. The private back-channel fights between Sussex and Kensington staffers. We'll pull the curtain back on Kate's silent involvement, how her choice of dress, words, and presence at the awards sent a message louder than any press release. We'll look at the King's private warning to Harry, a letter that insiders say left Harry stunned, not for what it said, but for what it implied. And then, we'll examine the fallout. Because this wasn't just a personal feud. It turned into a public relations nightmare. Sponsors backed out. Hollywood allies distanced themselves. And even once loyal friends began to whisper, maybe they've finally gone too far. But here's the thing. You haven't heard the whole story. Not even close. The truth behind why William banned Harry from the 2026 BAFTAs isn't just one moment. It's a slow-burning series of betrayals, blunders, and battles that go back years. This wasn't an impulsive move. It was strategic, tactical, and, according to one palace aide, unavoidable. But is that true? Or was this William's version of revenge? Was the heir finally showing he's done playing diplomat and ready to take control? And where does that leave Harry? Is this the beginning of a new chapter? Or the tragic final act in the story of two brothers who once had the world at their feet? Because if you think the worst is over, you're wrong. The night of the BAFTAs may have been the public climax, but the real firestorm was just getting started. And it began in the shadows of a London hotel room, with a single text from Meghan, followed by a 5-word reply from William that ended it all. But what did he say? And why did it send Harry into a rage he couldn't contain? You're about to find out. Because this isn't just a royal drama. It's a family civil war, with reputations, legacy, and crowns on the line. And what comes next will shake the monarchy at its core. What if the door you were planning to walk through had been locked long before you even reached it? Not by a stranger, not by a rival, but by your own brother, in total silence. That's exactly what Prince Harry experienced in the weeks leading up to the 2026 BAFTA Awards. To the outside world, everything seemed quiet, polished, normal. But behind closed doors, a private operation was underway, carefully designed to ensure one thing. Prince Harry would not set foot near that red carpet. And the cruelest part? He didn't even know it yet. Let's rewind. Back to January 2026, 6 weeks before the BAFTAs. Harry had a plan. After months of negative press, dwindling podcast numbers, and lukewarm Archwell releases, he was ready to take back control of the narrative. Not through another interview, not with a second memoir, but with a red carpet comeback. You see, for Harry, the 2026 BAFTAs weren't just an awards ceremony. They were an opportunity, a chance to stand shoulder to shoulder with British talent, to be seen as relevant again in the heart of the UK entertainment scene, to plant a flag back on British soil without needing royal approval, and more than anything, to show Meghan was still a style icon, and he, a power player. It wasn't about awards. It was about optics. But here's the kicker. Harry never received an invitation. Why? Because no invitation was ever going to be sent. Not to him. Not to Meghan. Not this time. Yet somehow, Harry didn't see it coming. Why not? Because Meghan had convinced him it was in motion. She'd been talking to stylists, sketching dress designs, having back-channel talks with a streaming executive who was helping sponsor one of the BAFTA short film categories. There were whispers, perhaps even hopes, that she might present an award herself. Harry, trusting Meghan's instincts, began preparing. Quietly, optimistically, perhaps even nervously. But behind that hope was a reality he hadn't yet realized. There was a list, and he wasn't on it. Not only was he not on it, his name had been specifically flagged. And who gave the instruction? The president of BAFTA, Prince William. Now, why would William do that? We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about how Harry slowly, painfully realized the door was already closed, and just how much effort had gone into keeping him in the dark. Because the signs were there. They always are, aren't they? But when you're desperate to be seen again, to be relevant, admired, applauded, you overlook the obvious. You explain away the silence. You tell yourself, they're just finalizing things. You ignore the fact that no one is calling you back. Harry began to notice things weren't going to plan. He wasn't getting responses from publicists in London. His calls to a Netflix liaison who once fawned over him went unanswered. Meghan's preferred makeup artist declined the job, citing a scheduling conflict, the same one she claimed the year prior when they tried to attend a fashion gala in Paris. Still, Harry brushed it off. He believed they had a path in. He believed the Sussex name still held weight. After all, they had deals, fame, followers, influence, didn't they? But influence fades faster than anyone warns you, especially when you burn bridges and then try to build a stage from the ashes. 1 week before the ceremony, Harry's private secretary reached out to BAFTA HQ under a discreet pseudonym, just to ask if attendance could be arranged for Mr. H and spouse. The reply was cold, corporate, legalistic. There are no remaining seats in the primary delegation rows. All additional guest submissions must be approved through BAFTA's internal Royal Protocol Office. Harry didn't know it yet, but that Royal Protocol Office, it reported directly to William. And William's instruction, allegedly whispered in the halls of Kensington Palace, was clear. Under no circumstances is Harry to be included, not even in the overflow press row. It was a surgical strike. Swift, quiet, effective, and brutal. Still, Harry didn't grasp the full picture. Because Meghan had a backup plan, or so she thought. One of her longtime stylists had a contact working with a luxury fashion house that was sponsoring a VIP after-party, an exclusive rooftop event following the awards. Meghan believed they could show up there. Skip the ceremony. Just do the party. Get photographed. Be seen. On the narrative. It wouldn't be official, but it would be strategic. Just enough to get tongues wagging. Enough to make people wonder if a reconciliation was in play. Enough to start shifting the energy. But even that was blocked. Because William's team didn't stop at the BAFTA committee. They discreetly reached out to key sponsors. Quietly. Politely. But with weight. And the message was unmistakable. If you support them, we won't support you. And just like that, the Sussexes were frozen out. Again. But still, Harry didn't know. And that made it worse. He was planning travel. Booking a luxury suite. Organizing a low-key UK return with Meghan. Just a few days. In, out, red carpet, done. They were practicing sound bites. Reviewing press angles. Choosing between emerald green and champagne gold for Meghan's dress. They truly believed they were walking into a rebranding moment. But in truth, they were walking into a trap of silence, designed by the very institution they once tried to escape. And at the center of it all, William, the brother who once told Harry they'd face the world together. The same brother who, just months earlier, had refused to take his calls. What changed? Why did William escalate to this level? Why block Harry so deliberately and so publicly? Was it jealousy? Bitterness? Or something more strategic? And most importantly, what did William know that Harry didn't? Because there's a moment coming. One Harry never expected. A moment when the full truth of the BAFTA ban would be exposed, and not in private, but in a way that would go viral within hours. And when it did, Harry would explode. But before that, he needed to be humiliated. Quietly, subtly, efficiently. And it began the moment he checked into a London hotel. The one Meghan insisted on because it had the perfect lighting for red carpet prep. He smiled. He took her hand. He thought they were on the cusp of something powerful. But the phone was about to ring. A single call. From a senior BAFTA staffer. Delivered with forced politeness and icy control. Prince Harry, the voice said, we wanted to clarify, before anything is published, that your names are not on the list. Nor will they be. Harry froze. Meghan looked up, confused. What is it? She asked. He didn't answer. Just turned, walked to the window, and stared out over the gray London skyline. Fists clenched, jaw tight. And in that moment, he knew. He'd been blocked. But by who? And why now? And most chilling of all, what came next? Because a leak was about to hit the press. And it would be far worse than a missing invitation. What do you do when the front door is slammed in your face, but the cameras are already rolling? If you're Meghan Markle, you don't walk away. You find another entrance, flashier, louder, and far more calculated. Because make no mistake, the 2026 BAFTA Awards weren't just a glamorous event to her. They were a battlefield, and she had every intention of winning. But here's the twist most people never saw coming. Meghan wasn't trying to be invited. Not anymore. She was trying to force the narrative, rebuild control, dominate headlines, and maybe, just maybe, provoke a reaction so dramatic, so visible, that it would put her and Harry back at the center of global attention, exactly where she believed they belonged. The strategy? Simple, strategic, surgical. If she couldn't be inside the BAFTA ballroom, she'd make sure the world talked about why and who kept her out. But how do you do that without looking desperate? Easy. You dress it up in Hollywood gold. Because what Meghan lacked in royal access, she made up for in powerful friends and a ruthless grasp of PR warfare. Let's break down what she did, step by step, and what it cost her. It all started with a call to Los Angeles, specifically to one of her closest Hollywood allies. A powerful female executive at a leading streaming platform who had once championed Meghan's failed animated series, Pearl. That same executive now had a seat at the table in a new BAFTA partnership, a diversity in film initiative backed by 3 major platforms: Netflix, Amazon Studios, and ironically, the BBC. Meghan's ask was bold. Put me in touch with the sponsor leads. I want to present, or host, or walk. Whatever makes the biggest splash. The exec hesitated. We'll need William's office to sign off, she said cautiously. Meghan's voice tightened. Then make sure they know what it looks like if they say no. Threat? Promise? Both? You decide. Either way, the message was received. And within 48 hours, rumors began circulating inside BAFTA corridors. Whispers that Meghan Markle was pushing hard to be placed as a presenter for one of the ceremony's new categories. The request wasn't subtle. It came wrapped in glamour, empowerment, and the language of inclusivity, the very PR weapons Meghan had wielded since her royal exit. She wasn't just offering to present. She was offering a moment, a statement, a symbol. From Buckingham Palace to the Beverly Hills red carpet, Meghan Markle, representing global women in media. You could practically hear the Vanity Fair headline writing itself. But here's the irony. It might have worked if it hadn't come with baggage. Because behind the scenes, Meghan's name was already raising alarms. Not just inside BAFTA's leadership, but among the very sponsors she was trying to woo. Some remembered the 2021 Oprah interview and its backlash. Others cited Archwell's recent controversies, from the Spotify debacle to accusations of financial mismanagement. One executive reportedly said, "We can't risk becoming part of her redemption arc." Ouch. But Meghan? She pressed forward. She wasn't just dressing for a red carpet. She was dressing for revenge. Stylists were flown in. Hair trials were held. She scheduled a Vogue UK photo shoot, with unrelated timing. Of course, just days before the awards. One version of her dress? A custom crimson-red gown with a flowing cape, designed to mirror a past BAFTA look worn by Princess Diana. Coincidence? Not a chance. She wanted optics. A visual echo of royalty. A hint of inheritance. A subtle dig at the institution she claimed had rejected her, but which she still styled herself after. But the real chess move came from a different angle. Social media. Because while Meghan played the official route, her team began seeding subtle rumors online. A flurry of anonymous leaks hinted she'd be attending. Expect a surprise royal appearance at BAFTAs this year. Look out for a controversial figure walking the carpet. She's back, and ready for her UK moment. Royal Twitter lit up. Fan accounts speculated. Even mainstream outlets began to ask the question, could Meghan Markle crash the BAFTAs? Now ask yourself, was that accident? Or was it bait? Because as buzz built, so did the pressure on William. He had three choices. Let her in and risk headlines being hijacked by Sussex spectacle. Publicly block her and look petty or threatened. Ignore it and let the speculation spiral out of control. He chose a fourth option, the quiet kill. BAFTA issued a neutral press statement confirming only official presenters and nominees would appear. No names, no drama. But Meghan got the message. And she didn't like it. She wanted a seat. She got a silence. So she changed tactics again. If she couldn't be inside the ceremony, she'd own the outside. Plans were drawn up for a surprise photo op at a luxury London charity gala scheduled 2 nights before the BAFTAs. It was unconnected, unofficial, but guess who was sponsoring it? A foundation with ties to one of the BAFTA's broadcast partners. It was the perfect setup. Arrive in London. Be photographed. Smile. Wave. Own the spotlight. Before the spotlight even turned on William. It wasn't just PR. It was warfare. But this time, the palace fought back. Quietly and mercilessly. Behind the scenes, William's staff reached out to the charity. They didn't threaten. They didn't bribe. They simply informed the hosts that including Meghan might complicate existing royal patronage relationships. Translation? Don't do it. And just like that, the invite vanished. The press was informed she wouldn't be attending. No drama. Just absence. The red carpet was rolled up. The lights turned off. Meghan? She was left stunned. And that's when things turned personal. According to a close friend, she said, and I quote, "They think they can erase me. Let's see how they like the spotlight when they're the villains." And so, the plan shifted again. This time, toward exposure. Meghan's team began preparing a candid blog post, allegedly to be published on Archwell, titled Invisible Invitations. It was set to include subtle jabs at unnamed institutions. Phrases like doors closed by those too afraid to open them. Talk of returning to a country that once made you feel unwelcome. It was ghostwritten. Ready. Polished. But it never saw daylight. Why? Because something else dropped first. A leak. And this one? It changed everything. Because hours before Meghan's invisible invite piece could launch, an internal BAFTA email was published online. An email that explicitly confirmed Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex are not to be included in the 2026 BAFTA attendee list by directive of the President's office. That President, Prince William. The leak exploded across social media. And with it, the real narrative began. Not speculation, not rumor. Proof. William had banned his brother. Not gently, not passively, but with written, documented authority. And suddenly, Meghan didn't need to post anything at all. The story had taken on a life of its own. But what happened next was even worse. Because Harry hadn't seen the email yet. He found out like the rest of us, through a notification on his phone. And when he read it, the rage was instant. Verbal. Explosive. Witnesses say he paced back and forth in his suite, shouting into his phone, calling it a declaration, saying William was destroying what's left. Meghan tried to calm him, but her hands were shaking. Because whatever strategy she had left, it had failed. The spotlight was theirs again, but not how they wanted. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, the hotel phone rang, and what the caller said would leave Meghan in tears. And Harry on the edge of doing something no one could take back. How many times can someone poke the lion before it stops walking away? How many veiled jabs, public betrayals, and calculated PR moves does it take before the man known for his restraint decides enough is enough? This was no longer about family drama. It was about respect. And William had finally reached his breaking point. Let's be clear, Prince William didn't explode in public. He never has. His fury doesn't come in fiery press statements or on-camera meltdowns. It comes in silence, in decisive moves, in actions that speak louder than 1,000 headlines. So when he banned Harry from the 2026 BAFTAs, it wasn't a sudden tantrum. It was a chess move years in the making. But what pushed him to finally play it? Let's go back to the week before the email leak. Inside Kensington Palace, tensions were already bubbling. William had caught wind of Meghan's maneuvering. The stylists, the sponsorship angle, the swirling rumors online that she would make a surprise appearance. And worse, whispers that Netflix, in partnership with Meghan's new film initiative, was trying to plant her into the ceremony via a diversity award. For William, this wasn't just personal. It was an invasion. He'd spent years turning BAFTA into a beacon of British creativity. He sat on panels, funded initiatives, attended events in the pouring rain to support struggling filmmakers. This wasn't just a royal gig. It was one of the few things truly his. And now, his estranged brother and sister-in-law, who had mocked the royal institution, walked away from duty, and aired their grievances on global stages, were trying to use his platform to rewrite their image? No, absolutely not. This wasn't just about Harry and Meghan attending an event. It was about hijacking it, making it about them. And William? He wasn't having it. So, quietly, he convened a meeting. Kensington Palace. Tuesday morning. 2 aides, 1 private secretary, and a security advisor. The agenda was short: BAFTA security and guest protocol review. But the conversation? Blunt. He laid it out clearly. I will not have them there. We need to shut this down before it escalates. No hesitation. No passive phrasing. Just a line in the sand. His team responded with the usual caution. Should we issue an official statement? Frame it as a scheduling conflict? Say the list is closed? But William was done with diplomacy. No, not this time. If they want to leak, let them. But let's make sure they have nothing to leak from us. It was strategic. No public attacks. Just absence. Erasure. A royal block so seamless it left no fingerprints. But Meghan, as we saw in Chapter 2, didn't back down. She pushed harder. So William's office moved faster. He personally contacted BAFTA's chief operating officer, a man he'd worked with for over a decade. And what did he say? Only a handful of people know the exact wording. But according to an insider with knowledge of the exchange, William was measured but final. This is a creative institution, not a media circus. We will not allow disruption, distraction, or attempts to exploit the ceremony for personal agendas. Boom. That was it. No screaming. No threats. Just cold precision. The message traveled down the chain. To the seating coordinators. The access list controllers. The press liaison officers. Harry and Meghan's names were scrubbed before they were ever penciled in. And just to seal it, a private memo was circulated, internally, quietly, but with unmistakable authority. By directive of the President's office, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are not to be considered for any official capacity or guest access at the 2026 BAFTA Awards. That was the email that later leaked. And once it did, there was no turning back. But William wasn't surprised. In fact, according to those closest to him, he expected it to leak. He knew Harry's camp would be humiliated, and he calculated that they'd try to spin it. And still, he went ahead. Why? Because in William's mind, the cost of doing nothing was higher. If he allowed the Sussexes back into such a prestigious UK event, it would signal weakness. It would tell the public, and the press, that all was forgiven. That Harry and Meghan could parachute into royal-adjacent events at will. And worse, that their strategy worked. The memoir, the interviews, the Netflix series. He knew they were playing a long game of optics, and he refused to be used as the backdrop for their redemption arc. Not after everything. Not after Spare, where Harry described him as physically violent, emotionally cold, and power-hungry. Not after Harry and Meghan, the docuseries that implied William's team had traded stories to throw Meghan under the bus. Not after years of silence from Harry, only to speak out when cameras were rolling. So William drew the line. And this time, he didn't ask Charles, didn't consult with advisors, didn't wait for permission. He acted. And the result? A quiet fury, a clear message, and a split that felt more permanent than ever before. But let's pause for a moment. Because here's the question most people forget to ask. Did William regret it? The answer, according to a senior palace aide, was complicated. No, he didn't regret the decision. But he knew what it meant. He knew it would hurt. That it would bury any remaining hope for reconciliation. That the public would side with him, for now, but that Harry's pain might one day come back to haunt them all. But for William, it was worth it. Because the alternative, giving in, staying silent, letting the Sussexes reshape the narrative, was worse. And that's where the quiet fury becomes key. William doesn't speak with rage. He moves with strategy. Every silence is calculated. Every no comment is deliberate. Every boundary drawn is permanent. So when the press called, trying to confirm the leaked email, the response was simple. BAFTA's guest list is confidential. The president does not comment on attendance speculation. Translation? We said what we said. And then, the speech. The one William gave on the night of the BAFTAs. Calm, poised, full of grace, but within it a knife. We are here tonight to celebrate those who serve creativity with humility, who place the craft above the self, and who understand that greatness is not claimed, it is earned. A long pause, then applause. The room knew what he meant. Harry knew too. And Meghan? She reportedly threw her phone across the hotel room when she heard it. Because that line, that was for her. For them. A public call-out, dressed in royal elegance. A reminder that in this kingdom, titles don't shield you from truth. And as William stepped off that stage, smiling for the cameras, posing beside Catherine in a gown that stole the show, he had made one thing undeniably clear. The doors were closed. Not jammed. Not blocked. Not slightly ajar. Closed. And Harry? Harry was on the outside, for the first time, truly unable to claw his way back in. But what William didn't know yet was that Harry wasn't going to go quietly. Because in a corner suite across town, a second phone call was about to be made. Not by Harry, not by Meghan, but by someone unexpected. A palace insider, with access to years of buried communications. And what they were about to reveal would threaten to blow the whole operation wide open. What happens when a royal command meant to stay behind velvet walls spills into the public arena? One email. That's all it took. A few cold sentences buried inside an internal memo. Sent discreetly, read quietly, but carrying the weight of a royal sword slash. And when it leaked, the gloves came off. Because this time, it wasn't gossip. It wasn't palace sources. It wasn't speculative hearsay from a friend of a friend's stylist. It was written, confirmed, and devastating. Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex are not to be included in the 2026 BAFTA attendee list by directive of the President's office. 8 words that changed everything. By directive of the President's office. Everyone knew what that meant. William, Harry's brother, had personally, and officially blacklisted him from one of the UK's most prestigious stages. Not suggested, not hinted, directed. The press didn't need to spin it. The headline wrote itself. Prince William bans Harry from BAFTA. Leaked email confirms royal freeze-out. And the timing? Perfectly catastrophic. The email hit the press less than 24 hours before the event. Just as red carpet preparations were underway. Just as Meghan was reportedly finalizing her alternative PR blitz. Just as Harry was still clinging to the belief that there might be a way in. Then came the blast. And everything imploded. Let's break down how it leaked. Because the truth is, leaks don't just happen. They're triggered. Someone, somewhere inside the system, decided the world needed to see this. And from what palace insiders suggest, it came from within BAFTA's own communications chain, not the palace. Why? Some claim it was sympathy. That a junior staffer felt uncomfortable with the exclusion and believed Harry was being treated unfairly. Others say it was sabotage, a calculated effort to expose William's ruthlessness and stir public outrage against him. But the third theory? That's the most compelling. That it was a warning. To Harry. To Meghan. To stop pushing. To make it clear that this was no longer a gray area. No longer unofficial. You are not wanted here. Not this time. Not anymore. And once the press got hold of the memo, it was over. Social media exploded. Hashtag BAFTA ban trended globally within the hour. Screenshots of the email circulated on Twitter, Reddit, even in TikTok explainers. Some commentators praised William, calling it a long overdue show of leadership. Others were stunned at the public pettiness of it all. But the Sussexes? They were blindsided. Harry, in particular, was crushed and furious. Because in his mind, despite everything, this wasn't supposed to be how the story ended. Yes, he'd said some hard things. Yes, he'd walked away from the firm. But he was still family, still a prince, still entitled, at the very least, to some public courtesy. Instead, he was being publicly humiliated again, and this time, by William's pen. The brothers hadn't spoken in over 5 months. Not since an icy, one-minute phone call following Queen Camilla's health scare, where Harry's attempt to check in was met with clipped sentences and a quick goodbye. But this was worse. This was final. There were reports that Harry threw his phone across the room, that he paced the suite for nearly an hour, yelling about betrayal, about the knife in his back. And Meghan? According to a source close to the couple, she went completely silent. Not out of shock, but because she saw this coming. She'd warned him that they weren't going to be welcomed, that the UK press, the palace, the firm, they'd all turn the page. But Harry still believed, still hoped, still held on to some sliver of the boyhood bond he once had with William. And now that hope was incinerated by an email. But the story doesn't end there, because after the leak, something strange happened. Harry received a call from an unknown number. At first, he didn't answer. Then, out of instinct, he picked up, and the voice on the other end spoke with careful, practiced discretion. You don't know me, but I've worked inside the communications team at the palace. You should know, this wasn't personal. It was protocol. But what happened next? That's where it gets dark. Harry was confused, guarded, suspicious. But the voice continued. There's more coming. And if I were you, I'd start asking questions about who authorized the internal monitoring. Click. That was it. No name. No context. Just enough mystery to light a fire. What did monitoring mean? Emails? Phones? Surveillance? Was someone watching Harry's attempts to break into the BAFTA system? Were Meghan's PR calls being traced? Suddenly, the issue wasn't just being banned. It was being watched. And that terrified Harry. He turned to Meghan. I think they've been tracking us. Her face dropped. It wasn't paranoia, not after what they'd endured since leaving the UK, but the idea that William, or someone under him, had been monitoring their movements. That was nuclear, and it made the leak even more sinister. Because what if the email wasn't leaked to shame William? What if it was leaked to trigger Harry, to push him into overreacting, to make him lash out, to make him look unhinged? Think about it. A public email. No statement from William. No apology. Just silence. The perfect trap. And Harry? He walked right into it. Hours later, a close friend of the Sussexes called Page 6 with an anonymous quote. It's shocking how far they'll go to humiliate Harry. He wanted to support British film, and they slammed the door in his face. Then came another leak. From Meghan's camp this time. It's telling that an institution built on creativity and inclusion would choose exclusion and pettiness. 2 strikes. The palace didn't respond, didn't flinch, didn't blink, and in doing so they won. Because without an official sparring partner, the Sussexes looked like they were arguing with shadows. And the public? They started to tune out. Some called Harry dramatic. Others said Meghan was playing victim again. The narrative was slipping, and Meghan knew it. She called her LA publicist, demanded damage control. They scrambled to rework a narrative piece, a soft-focus editorial about resilience, womanhood, and choosing peace over chaos. It was scheduled for release the day after the BAFTAs, but it was already too late, because while Meghan was crafting quotes, William was preparing to take the stage. And what he said, in front of the cameras, beneath the spotlight, with the world watching, would cut deeper than any leaked email ever could. How does a prince fall apart? Not in a palace, not in a tabloid headline, but alone in a hotel suite, silk curtains drawn tight, phone in hand, cameras waiting outside the lobby, and a brother's rejection burning through his veins like acid. That's where we found Prince Harry in the hours following the leak. The world had just read the email, the one that confirmed everything he feared and everything Meghan tried to prepare him for. Not only was he not welcome at the 2026 BAFTA Awards, he had been explicitly banned by William. No ambiguity, no plausible deniability, just cold, direct rejection. But what happened next? No press release could prepare us for that. Because while the public scrolled through tweets and debated loyalties, Prince Harry was breaking down, and he wasn't doing it quietly. The outburst began shortly after sunset. The London sky hung heavy and gray over the Langham Hotel, where Harry and Meghan had quietly checked in 3 days prior under an alias. Mr. and Mrs. Tyndall. A nod to Mike, perhaps, or maybe just a last attempt at privacy. They'd taken the penthouse. Top floor. Discreet security. Private entry. But what happened inside that suite would soon become global news. At 6:42 p.m., guests on the 9th floor began calling the front desk. Shouting. Thumps. A man's voice, loud, angry, spiraling. One witness, staying 2 doors down, described it this way. It sounded like someone had just found out they'd been betrayed by their best friend. Or their worst enemy. Both, in Harry's case. According to hotel staff, who later spoke under anonymity, the shouting began after Harry slammed his phone down on the marble coffee table. Then came a string of pacing. Frantic. Directionless. And then, the words. He thinks he can erase me. He thinks this is over? It's not over. He's a coward, hiding behind silence. Tell him he's dead to me. Tell him that. He wasn't just angry. He was furious. But not just at William. At himself. At Meghan. At the situation. At the years of build-up that had led to this moment. This perfectly orchestrated humiliation. He grabbed a chair. Threw it against the wall. Not violently. But with desperation. This wasn't a tantrum. It was grief. Rage. Abandonment. Because say what you want about Harry. He never stopped hoping that somehow, through the smoke of memoirs and interviews and scandals, his brother might still see him. Still protect him. Still remember the boy they both used to be. But now, William had become the gatekeeper. And Harry? Just another outsider. At 7:05 p.m., Meghan reportedly tried to intervene. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Spoke gently. But Harry, lost in the spiral, pulled away. You said we could handle this. You said they wouldn't dare. Her face hardened. The calm, collected facade cracked just enough for her to say. And you said he was still your brother. Silence. That line. It landed like a punch. And Harry, red-eyed, breath short, hair disheveled, just stared. In that moment, something shifted. The fury didn't vanish. It calcified. What happened next was impulsive. At 7:13 p.m., Harry picked up his phone and dialed. Not his publicist, not his assistant, not even Charles, but a journalist. One of the few remaining sympathetic contacts in the press, an editor at a liberal UK weekly who had previously praised Harry's mental health advocacy. And what he said was raw, unfiltered. You want a story? Here's your story. My brother, the future king, just banned his own blood from a public event. You think that's royal leadership? The journalist was stunned. And before he could respond, Harry continued. Go ahead. Quote me. They want war. They've got it. Click. That was it. Within 20 minutes, the editor had written 400 words. A blistering op-ed titled, "The Invisible Prince: Why William's BAFTA ban signals the monarchy's cold new future." The piece didn't quote Harry directly, but the tone? You could hear his voice in every paragraph. It dropped at 9 p.m. And just like that, the media narrative began to split. Not everyone was Team William anymore. Not after reading that. Because love him or hate him, Harry had humanized his pain. And William? Still silent. Still controlled. Still the cold, calculated heir who wrote off his brother with a memo and didn't blink when the world found out. It was an emotional win. If only for a moment. But that win came at a cost. Because the press, now smelling blood, began asking, what else is happening inside that hotel room? If Harry's this angry, what's Meghan doing? What comes next? And just as the frenzy built, a second leak hit the wire. But this time, it didn't come from Meghan, or Harry, or even the palace. It came from within BAFTA's own legal department. A draft of a confidential incident report, prepared days earlier, outlining potential disruption scenarios related to unauthorized Sussex presence. It listed contingency plans, security protocol, and this sentence: should the Duke or Duchess of Sussex attempt to access the ceremony without credential, standard security removal procedures will be enacted discreetly. In plain English, if Harry tried to show up, he would be removed, escorted out, like a common intruder, a trespasser. That leak landed like a bombshell. And for Harry, already spiraling, it was the final straw. Because now it wasn't just a snub. It was a warning, a threat, a humiliation so complete, so public, that even his allies began texting. You need to respond. Now. Get in front of this. But how? How do you respond when your brother just had you written out of your own country's culture? When the institution you were born into is now treating you like a PR liability? You explode. And Harry did. But this time, the explosion wasn't verbal. It was strategic. Because sometime after 10 p.m., Harry placed one final call. Not to a journalist. Not to a friend. But to a Hollywood producer. The one behind the Archwell Netflix documentary. And what he said would change everything. Remember when we said the story was done? It's not. I've got one more chapter for you. What Harry meant by one more chapter would become clear in the coming days. But in that moment, raw, wounded, and burning with humiliation, he had made a decision. If William wanted war, he was ready to fight. And what he planned to reveal would make Spare look like a bedtime story. Because now, Harry wasn't just a prince. He was a man with nothing left to lose. Whispers in the hallway, side glances in the BAFTA boardroom, back-channel phone calls where everyone thinks they're off the record. But in the end, every conspiracy has a heartbeat. And this one, it was pounding through the walls of the British establishment. Because now the question wasn't just why Prince Harry was banned from the 2026 BAFTAs. It was, who really did it? The public had seen the email, the directive from the president's office. And yes, all eyes turned to Prince William. But was he the one who pulled the trigger? Or just the one who held the pen? Let's peel back the layers. Because as insiders would soon reveal, the blacklist wasn't just a royal decision. It was the result of a long-simmering, quietly documented institutional warning system, a checklist of red flags that had been quietly building since 2020. And at the center of that system? 2 words: reputational risk. Let's unpack it. It started years earlier, around the time of the Sussexes' infamous Oprah interview. Behind closed doors, top-level representatives from several UK cultural institutions, including the Royal Opera House, the National Gallery, and yes, BAFTA, held a discreet meeting. The purpose? To coordinate media sensitivity guidelines for royal-adjacent partnerships. Translation? Damage control. You see, after the Sussexes accused the royal family of racism, neglect, and cruel indifference, institutions that had previously welcomed them began asking the same question. What if we book them? And then it backfires. Because Harry and Meghan weren't just controversial. They were unpredictable. One day, global darlings. The next, the center of a media firestorm. And institutions like BAFTA, they don't do chaos. They do prestige. They do order. They do optics. So after 2021, an unofficial directive, some call it the Whisper Protocol, began circulating among major UK arts organizations. Avoid placing the Sussexes in front-facing roles without clearance from the palace. It wasn't law, it wasn't written, but it was understood, and it remained unspoken until early 2026, when Meghan began her push. That's when it activated again. Suddenly, internal emails started flying. From sponsorship coordinators, from legal advisors, from reputation risk officers, all asking the same thing. Has this been cleared with Kensington? Do we have guidance on potential Sussex participation? Has the President's office signed off? And William's office? Didn't hesitate. They issued the now infamous directive. Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex are not to be included. But what most people missed, and what never made the headlines, is who advised him to do it. Because William didn't act alone. In fact, multiple insiders now confirm that the palace's communications secretary, a former crisis PR executive known for managing institutional collapses, warned William of a specific scenario. If you allow them in, they will steal the moment. Not because they're malicious, but because they're the story. Always. The worry wasn't that Harry would cause a scene. It was that his mere presence would shift the spotlight. And that was unacceptable, especially for an organization that already had to deal with headlines like, "Why are the BAFTAs so white? Royal favoritism at the film awards?" The last thing they needed was to be accused of politicizing the event again. And Meghan? She brought politics everywhere she went. At least, that's how they saw it. Then came the internal reports. Yes, actual reports. Documents compiled by BAFTA's risk and security team, outlining previous press storms, including Meghan's alleged attempt to alter a Vogue UK cover last minute to highlight Archewell donors. The time Harry's PR rep called a BAFTA junior producer incompetent for not replying to an email within 24 hours. Meghan's now infamous snub of the 2020 BAFTA Tea Party in LA, when she allegedly refused to attend unless she was seated at the center of the photo op stage. Petty? Maybe. But in the world of high society and polished diplomacy, perception is everything. And perception of the Sussexes, at that point, was a swirling storm. So the list was built. A literal list, one insider says, was stored in a sensitive access folder titled Red List, Event Risk Level 4+. On that list were names marked as not recommended for inclusion. At the top, H&M. But here's the twist. The list predated William's directive. It had been circulating internally for over a year, meaning, even if William hadn't personally banned them, they still wouldn't have been invited. The machine had already moved without him. So why did he step in? Because, as one royal advisor revealed, he saw it as a test of whether the Sussexes would respect the boundaries, stay in their lane, play it cool. But they didn't. Meghan pushed. Harry made calls. The team stirred rumors online. And that activated William. That's when he added the directive, not just to ensure they were blocked, but to send a message. Not to Harry, to everyone else, to BAFTA, to the press, to other institutions. If you want to associate with the Sussexes, fine, but not while I'm in the room, not on my stage, not on my watch. And the moment that directive went public, it became policy, not just for BAFTA, for everyone. Within 48 hours, at least 2 other UK institutions privately cancelled scheduled appearances from Sussex-affiliated speakers. A film school in Manchester. A diversity roundtable hosted by a former BBC executive. Both pulled out. No explanation given. But insiders confirmed the same reasoning. Too hot. Too political. Not worth the risk. Harry had been blacklisted. Not by a single decision, but by accumulated consequences. Years of tension. One-sided media control. Explosive revelations. And now, the doors were closing. One by one. But was it fair? That's the question still debated. Some say William was justified. That leaders must draw lines. Protect institutions. Prevent chaos. Others say it was petty. Cruel. A betrayal not just of brotherhood, but of family. Even some within BAFTA questioned the move. One board member reportedly said, "We are an arts organization, not a palace pawn. If we start banning people based on family feuds, where does it end?" But the decision held. Because that's how power works. Once it moves, it rarely looks back. And now, Harry wasn't just a man without a stage. He was a symbol of what happens when you challenge the system and lose. Still, the story wasn't over. Because while the blacklist had been activated, another list was about to surface. A confidential memo, never meant for public eyes, detailing a series of complaints filed by Meghan during her brief attempts to collaborate with BAFTA years earlier. Allegations of exclusion, coded language in emails, a suspicion that they never intended to include me from the start. The memo had been buried, forgotten, but now it was about to resurface, and what it contained would make William's blacklist look like a spark, compared to the wildfire about to come. Some feuds burn loud, some flicker in public, but others, like this one, smolder quietly behind velvet-curtained boardrooms and polite smiles. And when they reignite, they explode. Because while the world focused on Prince William's directive and Harry's emotional unraveling and the headlines that screamed about a brother's betrayal, there was another story buried deep beneath the chaos. One that had started years ago, and it belonged to Meghan Markle. Specifically, to her first real attempt to insert herself into the British cultural elite. A plan that failed so spectacularly and left such a bitter aftertaste that BAFTA insiders quietly agreed on one thing. She would never be allowed back in. But what exactly happened? What was so damaging, so quietly catastrophic, that an entire institution would shut its doors without ever saying a word? It starts in 2020, when Meghan was still a working royal. Still trying. Still smiling. Still clapping next to Harry at engagements while the British press nitpicked her every facial expression. But behind the scenes, Meghan was preparing her own move. You see, while the rest of the family played by palace rules, Meghan had always played a different game. Narrative, branding, control, and her next project was meant to cement her as a new kind of royal. Not just a duchess, but a cultural force. The plan was bold. Create a BAFTA-affiliated program focused on empowering underrepresented women in film. Work with top studios. Use her star power to spotlight young filmmakers. Be seen not just as Harry's wife, but as a producer, a visionary, a builder. Sound familiar? It should. It was the prologue to Archetypes, to the Netflix deal, to the global influencer Meghan eventually became. But this time, she wanted to do it from inside the royal system, with official support. Royal branding, BAFTA prestige. It could have worked. Should have, maybe. Except it didn't. Because from the moment Meghan's team reached out to BAFTA's Diversity and Inclusion Committee, things went sideways. Emails were exchanged. Lots of them. In Meghan's mind, she was pitching a legacy program. In BAFTA's mind, she was trying to fast-track influence through royal clout. The language was polished. But the subtext? Sharp. We'd like to explore the possibility of a Duchess-led panel at this year's BAFTA showcase. We believe this initiative aligns perfectly with BAFTA's mission, and the Duchess is happy to offer her platform to amplify it. BAFTA's response? Neutral. Delicately so. We appreciate the interest and are currently reviewing programming priorities for the season. Please note our limited panel slots are curated based on annual artistic merit and pre-selected themes. Translation? We're not just handing you a microphone because you're royal. But Meghan's camp wasn't done. They followed up. Twice. Then a third time. And when the polite evasions continued, Meghan herself reportedly stepped in. And this time, she wasn't smiling. According to one senior BAFTA staffer who spoke off the record, Meghan made a direct call to a board member, a longtime veteran of the British art scene. The tone? Measured, controlled, but unmistakably pointed. I was hoping this initiative would be received with more enthusiasm. I understand how these things work. But I do wonder if there's a deeper issue here. That phrase, a deeper issue, landed like a grenade. Because behind closed doors, it was interpreted as an accusation. A warning. A veiled threat. Was Meghan implying that race was playing a role in her exclusion? Was she suggesting bias? Or worse, was she laying the groundwork to call it out publicly? Whatever the intention, it had its effect. Suddenly, BAFTA's leadership went on high alert. Internal emails described a delicate reputational situation. One legal advisor suggested documenting all correspondence in the event of future inquiries. Another proposed involving the palace for clarification on boundaries. But the palace didn't intervene. In fact, they distanced themselves entirely. Because by that point, the split between the Sussexes and the senior royals was already bubbling beneath the surface. So BAFTA was left to handle it alone. And their response? Radio silence. They stopped replying. They didn't confirm. They didn't deny. They didn't invite. They just disappeared. A classic PR defense. Don't engage. Don't fuel the fire. Just move on. And Meghan? She got the message. Loud and clear. She wasn't welcome. Not then. Not officially. Not without compromise. But it didn't end there. Because Meghan, according to leaked internal notes, drafted a private statement through her Archwell PR firm. Not for publication, not yet. But as a contingency, a carefully worded piece titled, "Behind the Velvet Curtain, What Progress in the Arts Really Looks Like." It was a masterpiece of suggestion, never naming BAFTA, but making pointed references to organizations claiming progress while silencing new voices. Spaces where women of color are embraced publicly, but excluded structurally. Efforts to collaborate that are met with hesitation until the cameras show up. The article was never released. But the draft? It made the rounds. One BAFTA executive said it best. We realized then that everything was a test. Every no could be turned into a headline. And that terrified them. Because unlike other royals, Meghan was a media weapon. If you crossed her, you might become a story. A villain. A system. So BAFTA made a decision. No more Sussex involvement. Period. Even as Harry and Meghan transitioned out of royal life. Even as they moved to California. Even after they landed Netflix. The door remained closed. Not out of spite. Out of survival. Because in the eyes of BAFTA's old guard, Meghan wasn't a collaborator. She was a liability. And when the 2026 drama erupted, they acted accordingly. Not with emotion, but with memory. With receipts. With policies. With old wounds that never really healed. And that's how the blacklist happened. Not from one feud, but from this feud. The one no one talked about. The one buried beneath layers of politeness, optics, and whispered cultural differences. And the irony is that Meghan still believed she had a shot. That her team's new angle, diversity through global storytelling, would somehow overwrite the past. That the doors would reopen. That the board would forget. But they hadn't. And now, that long-forgotten feud had come roaring back. With an email. With a leak. And with the kind of public fallout that makes quiet vendettas feel like earthquakes. But the story doesn't stop here. Because while Meghan processed her renewed rejection, and Harry paced the suite with clenched fists and betrayal burning in his chest, there was another player in the game. One who had been watching quietly from the sidelines. Someone with their own memories of Meghan's past behavior. Their own theories. Their own grudge. And that person was about to make a very public move. One that would throw the palace into panic. One that would threaten to expose everything. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't grant interviews. She didn't leak. But when Catherine, Princess of Wales, made her move, everyone felt it. Because in a family consumed by headlines, whispers, and explosive tell-all exposés, Kate had always played a different game. Not with words, with presence. And in the lead-up to the 2026 BAFTAs, while Meghan schemed her red carpet return and Harry spiraled in a London hotel suite, Kate was working behind the scenes with a quiet precision that left even royal aides stunned. She didn't just outshine Meghan. She outplayed her. Let's rewind. 2 weeks before the BAFTAs, Kensington Palace staff noticed something curious. Kate, known for planning her wardrobe months in advance, often with meticulous coordination between her stylists, press team, and the event's hosts, suddenly scrapped her original gown. No explanation, just a shift. The original plan had been a sleek, pale blue Alexander McQueen, soft, elegant, uncontroversial. But now, she had requested red. Not just red. Crimson. Deep. Striking. War paint red. Why? At first, the staff assumed it was symbolic, perhaps a nod to a British designer or a seasonal choice. But then came the next change. Her new dress wasn't from the usual designers. It was custom designed by a boutique atelier, the same London house Meghan had reportedly approached during her 2020 BAFTA outreach and had been turned down by. Coincidence? Not a chance. This was a message. Kate's stylist confirmed privately that the entire look, the silhouette, the jewelry, even the hairstyle, had been reverse-engineered from a now-shelved Meghan ensemble leaked online the week prior. Let that sink in. Kate knew exactly what Meghan had planned to wear and beat her to it. Not with a copy, with a coronation. She walked onto that red carpet like it belonged to her. And in the eyes of the world, it did. But the outfit was just the beginning. What happened next confirmed the rumors inside Kensington. Kate was no longer playing defense. She had entered the chessboard. Privately, she began coordinating with BAFTA's public relations team. Not to gossip, not to interfere with guest lists, but to amplify her own message. She approved a rare pre-show interview with a trusted entertainment reporter, her first in over a year.